Welcome to The Value Script, the podcast where we bring value every episode for the everyday person. Today, we're going to continue with Sam Scheid.
Yeah, we put in our dudes and then left.
Came home.
Yep. And it was all so that they could secure, it was for elections, so they could provide security for an honest election, which is kind of oxymoronic, right? We're doing what we can to provide security for an election in a foreign country, but then we have our issues with elections here in America.
That is incredible, dude, that you...
Yeah, exactly, right? Your re-election happened.
They got to have a re-election, right?
Yeah.
Is that Hamed Karzai?
No, it was the one after him.
I don't
even remember his name. He disappeared.
Show my ignorance.
Yeah, when we pulled out of Afghanistan, that guy just disappeared with his...
He got disappeared?
Yeah, well, no, he's surviving somewhere with his bajillions of dollars that the U.S. funded him, I don't remember his name.
Oh, man.
So, several stories, along those lines that it's the mission that we were sent there to do, and it's like at the time I was proud to have done it. I was happy to do it. Never fully told my wife about that story till I was home. Yeah. And then it was like, you did what? Like this happened, cause it's like, how do you tell your wife that, like I remember I got home that night or home back to my little room that night. And like the adrenaline's so high, like trying to like replay the whole thing in your mind. Like you're doing your sworn statement for the intelligence guys and for the, for them to document it all and everything. And like, you can't even write, like you're trying to write this shit. You're just like going a million miles an hour, like your hands are just like this jittery. Get back, you all try and go eat, now it's breakfast time. We all go to the chow hall and we're just kind of like, whatever, like I don't want anything. Like just, what I want to do is I just want to go call my wife, but I don't want to talk to her about this. I just want to hear her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if I can hear her, then everything's right in the world. And that's what's more important to me. Right. Is my family and just knowing that they're okay.
And not to give her anxiety about things neither of you can control.
Yeah. And I don't want to tell her this just happened, because now it just becomes like, well, now I'm more worried about you. And I had just been telling her, no, most of my flights are just daytime, ring routes, supporting whatever's not
delivering goats.
Yeah, delivering goats, right? But the majority of that deployment were, direct action missions, at nighttime, sometimes several a week. And honestly, I loved it. The adrenaline rush you get doing those flights is like next level.
I bet.
It's so much fun.
How incredible, though. I mean, that's really a neat story when you realize that you were aided by God.
Yeah.
And
like, there's no doubt in my mind.
How grounding and necessary was that faith in those times and through those deployments?
100% necessary. It's what floated me through those times, because it's like some of the darkest times, the most evil you could ever imagine, right outside the perimeter of where we were. It's just some of the atrocities that go on in war. I like, seems just nowadays war is the answer to so many things, and it's the answer to none. Nothing is solved by war. Just a bunch of young people go die. Amen. While a bunch of old people make these decisions. Yeah. And that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to bring politics into this or anything, but it's hard to see, like the military industrial complex just gets, it gets shut down when Afghanistan shuts down, and then, oh wait, let's refire it back up. We're
back on two new fronts.
Yeah. And it's to me, it's hard because I still have friends in the military, and I'd hate to see them go, survive 20 years of sustained combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, only to go over and fight another war in another country and have something catastrophic happen. I mean, there was just this past weekend, a helicopter doing some training in the Mediterranean crashed and 5 people died.
Saw that.
I mean, it's the cost of doing business in the military, and we all understand that, but a lot of times it's needless and it shouldn't happen.
I do think you have a decent point, though, that if the people making the decisions to go engage in these conflicts actually also shoulder the responsibility of going there and doing the lifting themselves, probably a lot less conflicts involvement.
100%.
Which, not to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But one I do want to go down.
Let's do it.
Is so going from your combat experience, then you went to your private sector life, your commercial pilot. Did you get back into the reserves at some point?
Yeah.
Because
I was dumb enough to go back in, I guess. No, what happened was COVID happened. Okay. So I was an airline pilot during COVID. COVID happens, and the airlines were decimated, right? Like, air travel all but ceased. I flew a flight from Dallas, Texas to Houston, Texas with one passenger on the airplane.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I wasn't flying
one person.
One person.
Wow.
I mean, I wasn't flying the 730s. I was flying an Embraer 175.
Were they wearing a mask the whole time?
She probably was. I don't know. If they were flying, they were probably one of the maskers. But it was a 76-seat airplane, and there's one passenger on board. But they considered it essential air service, so I was considered an essential employee. I had to carry this stupid little letter from SkyWest that said I was essential. In fact, the only place I ever got stopped was twice, and they both happened in San Jose, California. Go figure. I was out running one day, and I get stopped.
You got pulled over running?
Yeah, I got pulled over. Like this cop pulls up, like pulls me over running, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" I show him the letter on my phone. He wanted a physical letter. I was like, I don't have a physical letter. He ended up letting me just whatever, like make sure you have the letter on you. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the dumbest thing ever. Like I'm literally looking at this row of homeless people. Like, did you ask them for their letters? Because they don't look like they're essential. Like I'd rather be home with my family right now too, because we don't know what's happening with this dumb pandemic thing. But here I am instead in a hotel room in San Jose. Then a few weeks later, same thing happened, but I pulled out the letter and the guy was just like, "Hey, I'm just making sure you have it is all."
You're trying to do activities that encourage health and promote health.
Yeah, right? And getting in trouble for it? No, heaven forbid you be healthy in this world. Right. So COVID happens and everybody in the airline industry pretty much didn't have a job anymore. They didn't furlough us. Thank goodness, but they reduced our minimums. So an airline pilot only gets paid when the doors close on the airplane.
Oh, really?
So when the door closes, they start getting paid. When the door opens, when they arrive at their destination, they stop getting paid. And that's how an airline pilot works. He's paid literally by the minute. Huh. But if you don't fly at least 76 hours every month, then you get paid. If you fly 40 hours a month, then you get paid for 76. That's how that was the SkyWest minimum. But they reduced that minimum, and I don't remember what they reduced it to. Not enough to even pay our mortgage with. And nobody was even flying. Oh, wow. So you're basically all on call because they got rid of all schedules, and it was just like, hey, I don't know how the pecking order even worked. You just get a random call sometimes and say, hey, we've got a flight for you. You're going to be at the airport. Everybody was on a 2-hour call out. So I'd show up to the airport, and that's when I did those San Jose legs. But firefighter. Kind of, yeah. Jeez. Like the most bizarre thing ever. Looking at our finances and watching our savings account get smaller and smaller and smaller because we're supplementing our mortgage. Life goes on even though the job didn't go on, right? So we decided that, well, how are we going to pay the mortgage? How are we going to feed our family? We have 6 kids now. I'd gotten out of the Army. We had our 4th kid before I got out. Right as soon as I got out, my wife, we found out we were pregnant with twins. Yeah. So now we have 6 kids. They're like, the oldest is, when the twins were born, the oldest was not even 7 years old. And so we're struggling, financially. Like I'm stressed out every day. And so I ended up joining the National Guard in Utah. Okay. Utah doesn't have Chinooks. They have Blackhawks and Apaches. I had worked with the Apache unit prior in 2012. Our Apache support that we had in Afghanistan was from the Utah National Guard. A bunch of great dudes in that unit. I had a lot of friends that I made during the 2012 deployment, and continued staying in contact with them. I knew they were getting ready to go on a deployment to Afghanistan. And not that I wanted to go on a deployment, but I needed something to supplement our income. And so I joined the National Guard. Didn't make it on the deployment because there was not a transition slot available to go learn to fly Apaches. That coincided or lined up with their deployment schedule. So they deployed, and I ended up going down to Alabama again to learn how to fly the Apache while they were deployed. And this, COVID's obviously happening. It ended up being kind of a worthless deployment. They didn't do a whole lot because of COVID, and everything was kind of drawing down anyways. They get back from deployment, and I'm back from the transition course, which was like 4 months long. And, just living in Utah, kind of riding orders with the National Guard, doing what I could with them. And then this mandate comes out for the COVID vaccine.
So did the pandemic actually impact the action load that
they had over there
overseas?
Yeah.
Were. I mean, due to what? Due to were people sick? Were they scared? Did they stay inside? Like what?
I don't know. They had to wear masks. They had to get COVID tested like every day. It was like this funny thing where there was not like a chow hall, like a representative would go pick up food for everybody. everybody had to social distance, like if I never hear those dumb terms again, I'll be happy. But
so the other side though, I mean, did they slow down too? Were they slowed down by the pandemic too?
No, man, just one side.
Okay. Well,
doesn't make any sense, right? Like they said it was like everybody that was on that deployment, they started trickling home just because there was nothing to do. As an Apache pilot in Afghanistan, your job is to shoot the guns on the helicopter.
Right.
But when there's not anything going on, there's not much of a mission for you. Simultaneously, there's this drawdown of troops going on in Afghanistan where everybody's slowly coming home anyways.
Right.
And so they all started coming home like earlier than their 9-month rotational schedule had said they were going to come home from. They all trickled in, and now that deployment's over. It was like, wow, that was kind of a waste of our time, waste of everybody's time, a waste of a whole bunch of money,
right.
In sending us all the way over there to do literally nothing. Quite certain that there was not even one engagement on that deployment for those Apache guys.
That just baffles my mind.
Previous deployment, there's like not an Apache flight doesn't go out typically where they don't shoot their guns, right? Like they're out there looking for someone putting a bomb down, or they're looking for troops in contact, for somebody to call them and say, hey, we're troops in contact. This is our location. The Apaches show up and, make the playing field uneven at this point.
That's a very good way to put that. very, very good way to put that. So, wow, that's incredible. All right. So back to your faced with a career altering decision.
Yeah. So it's, drill for that month in September of 2021 happened to be Saturday was September 11th, which is my wedding anniversary. Whoever does that, just my wife and I, right? So that was our anniversary. I was a little league football coach for my son, my 9-year-old son's little league football team. And I had my commander before drill that weekend was like, hey dude, just so you know, I think they're going to try and make everybody get the COVID shot this weekend. And I was like, well, that's dumb. Like, why would they do that? And he's like, I don't know. We'll talk about it when you get here. And I texted him back and I said, my son has a football game. It's literally just down the street from where we have drill in West Jordan. Can I coach his game in the morning and then come after lunch? And he said, yeah, that's fine. You're not going to miss anything, because they're just doing COVID health briefings this weekend. And I was like, oh, what a waste of time. So I go coach the game. We got smoked, show up after lunch and and it's like, it's a completely different environment than it's ever been out there. Right. Like masking up is like taking super serious. Like every single person is wearing a mask, and nobody's like, normally it's like, just picture you and a bunch of your close friends where you're all immature and you goof off and you like, do as much as you can to like bother each other. Like that's what we are. And as pilots, we're immature, like
good
bunch of goofballs.
Good.
And get out there and everyone's wearing a mask. Everyone's like, no one's near each other. And I'm like, this is just really stupid. Like, what is going on? And I asked what I missed in the morning. They're like, you didn't miss anything. We were all in the auditorium and there were a couple doctors in there, Army doctors. And they're telling us that, this is what we're doing today. Everybody's getting the COVID shot, blah, 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 just all this stuff going on. And so I was asking my friends, I was like, so like what'd they say? And they said, nothing, dude. Every time anybody asked a question, the doc would just say, you know what? I don't know. That's not my lane. All I know is that this vaccine is safe. Just do it. It's like, but all of us are like talking like, no, we're not doing it. Like none of us are getting this stupid shot. None of us are going to do it. Like we're in our mid 30s, late 30s, whatever. We're healthy. I don't feel like COVID is a threat to me. Looking at numbers, you can go on the internet at this time and you could look at, X amount of tests were administered and X amount of tests were positive. You're like, well, that's like not very many at all.
Right.
And then you look at the numbers like, like 3 COVID deaths today. And then they give the age range of those that died. It's like between ages 35 and 85. Like, no, that's not an age range like that you classify somebody as. Like, I have nothing in common with an 85-year-old health-wise.
It's like a cable install time window.
Yeah.
Be there sometime between 6 a.m. and midnight.
Yeah.
Make sure.
Exactly.
You're going to die somewhere between 35 and 90.
Yeah. So like common sense prevails here, right? Like I don't... Again, going back, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can look at these numbers and decide for myself that I don't feel like I'm in any kind of threatened category where I need to be worried about this thing. And I've been looking at these numbers all along since the onset of COVID. Yeah, like 2 weeks to slow the spread or whatever it is, stay home. Like we do our best to do that.
Right.
But then beyond that, when it's like, no, like it continues on and kind of perpetuates.
Months past that.
Yeah, now we're way beyond that. To me, I'm thinking it's just kind of a hoax. And I don't want to go get this COVID shot because I don't know enough about it. There's not enough studies about it. There's already these rumors of like blood clots and heart issues in young people who have gotten this COVID vaccine. So I don't want to do it. And so we come back from lunch and they tell us, like, they shut the room and you're divided up into your company. I was in Bravo company, and we go into our Bravo company office. You have all the pilots on one side of the room. You have all the enlisted guys on the other side of the room. The enlisted guys are the ones who work on the helicopters, the maintainers, the armorers, or whatever they are. They're over on one side, we're on this side. And I'm just kind of like, this is stupid. Like, I kept saying it over and over, like, what is going on? Like, this is like, does anybody else not see the problem with this?
Right.
And all of like my pilot friends, like the majority of them are like, no, like this is like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this no matter what. And I remember I'm just this loud voice. Cause like I see all these enlisted guys over on the other side of the room that they're literally like feeling like threatened by this. Like, our commander's up there reading this memo from Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, about how the COVID vaccine, blah, 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 whatever it says, I don't even know. But it's almost like, don't have any thought for yourself, do as you're told, and don't ask a question.
Right.
And that's how they wanted it.
Wow.
So they said, is anybody here already vaccinated? Like, the 3 people you would expect to have been vaccinated, like, raise their hand. And, they're excused for the weekend, like, yeah, you're dismissed from drill for the rest of the weekend.
Did they verify the vaccination status?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, here's here's my card.
You couldn't just raise your hand and been like,
yeah. So those people got excused. They left for the day. And then they say, does anybody not want to receive the COVID vaccine? And I'm pretty sure every hand went up that stayed there. And then they proceed to read this memo from the SecDef. And then they read this other memo from the state aviation officer from the state of Utah that says, if you don't get the COVID vaccine today, there was a single dose shot, and then there were a couple different 2-dose shots. If you got the single dose shot that day, then you were good to go. If you got the first dose of the 2-dose vaccine, you were good to go. If you refused to do either of those that day, you got what's called a GOMAR, which is a General Officer Memorandum of Record that goes on your permanent file. Good luck in your future military career. It's a showstopper. It'll bar you from further promotion, from future opportunities that exist. Like, you're basically done. As soon as your commitment is up, you're out of the military type thing.
You're blacklisted.
Mm-hmm. And then they said, and if you go 2 weeks and you're still not in compliance, we begin the separation process. And then he looks up and he says, and it's not what you want to hear. It's an other than honorable or a dishonorable discharge. Does anybody still not want to get it? And here I am, like, raising my hand, thinking everybody behind me is doing the same thing, and turn around, there's one other guy there.
No way.
I'm like, what in the world? And so I'm like, just making this huge stink, and someone's like, go in the hallway. So I go out in the hallway with him. He outranks me. And he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know, man. Like, 20 minutes ago, you were standing here saying that under no circumstance are you getting this COVID vaccine. And I'm continuing that stance. I'm not getting it. And he said, do you realize that if one of the enlisted guys were acting the way you're acting, they'd get in trouble. They'd have an Article 15, which is like a punishment of the military. And I said, dude, that's exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want those enlisted guys to see that there's at least one officer over here that has a backbone to stand up for something that they don't think is right. Yeah. Because you literally, like, you were telling me all morning that no matter what, you're not getting this.
20 minutes ago, you were a band of brothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now, to keep their job.
Yeah.
To keep their opportunities in front of them.
Yeah. Like, because, you have 16 years in the military and you can't afford to not have a retirement. Dude, all weekend, you always tell me about how much money you make in your civilian job. Why do you care about a federal retirement so you can have health care the rest of your life, or a couple $1,000s a month for the rest of your life? I was like, is that worth your integrity, or is that worth, like, you said you weren't going to do it and now you're going to go do it because they threaten you with this. Right. I was like, I'm threatened with the same thing. No, I don't have 18 years, 16 years into the game. I've got over 11 now with active duty time and National Guard things, but I'm not doing it. We go back in there. Everybody goes down to get their first dose of the shot, minus me and this other guy. We get called into the office, and we're in the commander's office. So now we're not in the classroom anymore setting. We're in the smaller office. And my commander, he was a good dude. He was doing the best he could. I just wish he would have been with me rather than complying, because he, as a captain, held way more weight than I did as a CW2, a chief warrant officer 2. Right. So he tells us, he's like, I've got a lot of issues with what they're doing with this, but I have to do what I have to do. And I was like, I get it. And I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
How much could you, like, if everybody there would have just said no?
I wish.
Like, would that have mattered? Or would they have just squashed every one of you? And
no, I think it would have absolutely mattered.
Really?
You know, instead, it's just like they force you into this corner, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I had rejoined the military and gone to a flight school, but I didn't owe the military a commitment. When I joined back in to become an Apache pilot in the National Guard, I didn't incur a commitment with the Army or the National Guard. My commitment was over. And so I said, well, let's look at a few options. In the military, literally there's an exemption for everything. It's a religious exemption, a medical exemption, a waiver for this, anything. Like I think the age for flight school is 32 years old. But I was in flight school with several dudes who were in their late 30s, early 40s, because there's a waiver for everything in the military.
Right.
So I said, let's explore the options of going down the religious exemption path. And he's just shaking his head and he's like, no, we can't. They won't even push it up. And I said, why not? And he said, well, you're LDS and the prophet, President Nelson,
our church isn't giving them,
got the vaccine. And so you have to get it. And I was like, the prophet didn't say we have to get the vaccine. Our church president didn't say we have to get the vaccine. He just went and got it.
We did highly encourage everybody to do it.
Exactly. But there's not like,
my understanding was they weren't giving out religious exemptions either.
They wouldn't even push it forward.
Right.
They would, like the Army. So I learned a whole lot after I went through this. The Army, if I submit a religious exemption or I request to have a religious exemption submitted, they're required to push it all the way up and let the chaplain or whoever of the Army decide whether or not I get that religious exemption. And in the meantime, I get to go into a like holding status rather than in a disciplinary status, but they wouldn't even push it up. And so he said, because your prophet got it, you can't do that. And I was like, well, what about a medical exemption? And he said, you're not on reproductive therapy or reproductive hormone therapy or whatever. So that's not an option either. Again, if you request these exemptions, they're supposed to submit it and push it up and let the Surgeon General or whoever deny you.
Right.
And that didn't happen either. And so I said, well, then what I think is my trump card, like, well, I don't know the Army anything. I just want to resign. Then I'll just get out.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, that's the other thing. You're barred from resignation. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, you're barred from resignation. I said, under what grounds? And he said, you're disobeying a direct order from the Secretary of Defense. I said, so my options are to get the vaccine or I get kicked out with an other than honorable / potentially dishonorable discharge. And he's shaking his head. And I'm like, wow, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Like, pick the lesser of these two evils, right?
Right.
So I'm not going to compromise. I'm not getting this vaccine. I know that. And so I end it that way. I leave the office thinking I got this GOMAR in my file.
Can I ask you, why not? Like, why not just, I know why not, but I just want to talk about the principle of why not just give in and go with the flow? Why not just take the jab and just go with the flow? Over time. So I had a lot of questions about it. Normally, the vaccine process in America takes several years to, get approved, and it still hadn't been approved. It was just this emergency use authority that they were making us all do it. And again, going back to looking at numbers, nothing made sense to me as to why I'm being forced to do this. I don't know why. I just knew that I didn't think the vaccine was right for me. My little brother joined the military after me. He went to basic training, and just like everybody in basic training, I took all my vaccines like I was supposed to. Like, you just kind of go through in step, lift your shirt sleeve up and they poke you, and take another step and they poke you again. Pull your pants down and they put a hepatitis B shot in your butt cheek. And when my little brother did that in basic training, his body had an adverse reaction to it. Oh, wow.
He developed an autoimmune disease from it, which took the Army 2.5, 3 years, something like that, for them to finally figure out what was wrong with him, because he was extremely sick for his first couple of years in the Army. And then they ended up medically retiring him after they discovered that his body was rejecting his kidneys attacking his kidneys because of the hepatitis B shot. They pinpointed it to that. So now I have questions about some of these things that we're just pumping into our bodies without asking any questions. And now, because I'm asking a question, I'm being labeled a conspiracy theorist or anything. Getting disciplined for it. And it was wild. It was crazy. So I just want to know more information, and that's kind of the bait. I'm like, hey, like, why? Like, the memo from the Secretary of Defense says June 30th of 2022 is the suspense date that the military has to be in compliance. We're September 11th, 2021. We still have 9 months before we need to be complying with what he's put out. Like, let's look at this. Like, let's think objectively about it. And like anything in the military, it kind of just goes away after a while. That's just, if anything I learned over the time on active duty, it was like, just wait and things will go away. I mean, I avoided on my deployments getting the typhoid or one of these nasty shots they put in, yellow fever or something like that. I avoided it both times. First time because my son was less than 6 months old when I left, and they do those shots like 2 weeks before you go, and it's like oozes this nasty stuff out of your arm. But they said if you have a baby at home, you can't get it. And then the second deployment, I had food poisoning the like day before I left. So I was like sick as a dog. So both times, like I was sick one time and I had a baby at home the first time, so I couldn't get that shot. But I remember like you'd look at these people's arms, like my buddy's arms, and have this big yellow nasty sore on their arm, like would just ooze this nasty pus out of it. I don't know. So we all kind of question, like, are we just like lab rats here? Like, what are we?
Well, I think one of the reasons to underscore the question or the point there is that these very authoritarian control moves that have come out recently, against, with the mandates, especially the COVID mandates, the vaccines, people losing their jobs, tens of thousands of people in healthcare that lost their jobs, lost their benefits, lost their ability to provide for their families, lost their reputations, people getting kicked out of colleges, people, being threatened with, being kicked out of nursing school or specialty programs and all these things they worked their whole lives for. If enough people would have said no, it would have mattered.
Would have mattered a whole lot.
And that's how that all that nonsense goes away. And if everybody says yes and just goes along with it, that tells the government, hey, we're a bunch of sheep. We're just going to do whatever you tell us to.
And honestly, that does play into it a lot. That has a lot to do with it. I've always been one that I kind of kick against the pricks. I ask questions. I kind of defiant in many ways. Like, tell me to do something, and there's like no way I'm going to do it. Give me an option, and I'm going to weigh my options and figure out what's best for me based on my current circumstances. And looking at everything, I just thought this is political, man. Like, there's no reason that everybody in America needs to have this COVID shot. Like, there's no reason the military, like the demographics of who we were in the military, like generally healthy people. I was active, a very active individual. I love exercising. I love running, things like that.
Hey, you got a ticket for running in San Jose.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just like, as I look at numbers, like 38 years old or whatever I was, like not a lot of 38-year-old dudes are dying from COVID that need to be like, this is stupid. Like, I feel like there's more harm if I get this vaccine, not to mention the pressure that's being applied from the government. Like, if you don't do this, then these are the serious consequences. You're going to get kicked out of school. You're going to get this. In my case, you're going to get kicked out of the Army. And it was scary, man. And
dishonorable discharge, you mentioned previously. What? Are you out of?
We're getting close.
What's what we're gonna do?
Well, I can wrap it up pretty quick.
We're almost done. A dishonorable discharge you mentioned earlier is like equivalent to a felony.
Yeah.
So, or it is a felony.
Yeah. What they were telling me, it's like, you're gonna lose your firearms. You're not gonna vote. You're gonna be this. Like, you're gonna be a felon. I remember somebody telling me in my chain of command somewhere along the way, if you rape somebody in the military, you know what you get when you get a dishonorable discharge. And I just laughed and I said, yeah, the difference between me and that person though is that I didn't rape anybody.
Right.
I just didn't get a vaccine.
Didn't get a vaccine.
Do you hear how stupid you sound, type thing? Like, this is ridiculous that it's even on the table.
Right.
So I get sent home from drill that weekend, like terrified. I go home, tell my wife, and she just is super supportive. Like, I'm super proud of me for standing up for what I believed in. And this goes on. I don't get I miss all the suspense dates, and I'm like, well, they didn't kick me out. And so I start filing paperwork to just resign. That kept getting rejected. Then October rolls around. They tell me I have to come back to drill. So I go down to drill. They say, you've got to bring a negative COVID test. You've got to wear a mask. We'll have a designated area for you, which was this joke, right? Corner. And it's like, oh, it's late at night. You need to get a COVID test. Like, first off, it's like, you can't come to drill. And then late at night, they're like, yeah, you have to come to drill. And you have to bring a negative COVID test. That's not an at-home test. You have to go find one somewhere. I'm like, well, there's nowhere going to give me a test right now.
You're symptom-free too, right?
Yeah, no symptoms at all. There's nowhere open that's going to give me a test. So I just showed up the next morning without any of it. And they're like, where's your negative COVID test? I was like, I don't have one. And they're like, where's your mask? I was like, I'm not wearing one. And they said, how come? And I said, well, I don't know. You're already giving me the worst possible outcome of a discharge that I can get. So what are you going to do to me?
Right.
Like, make it a double dishonor? You know what I mean?
What more
like,
do I have to lose?
Like, I have nothing to lose at this point. Like, all right, well, there's inside the foyer area next to the bathroom, there's a taped off area for you. I was like, yeah, not happening either. I'm not cattle. Like, I will not go sit in that blue taped off area and waste my day. Like, I'm going to just come out. If there's work to be done, I'll do it. Otherwise, like, let's get on with life.
As I say, did at some point somebody ask you, why do you keep showing up?
I kept showing up because it was my duty. I don't want them to have any additional ammunition against me. That's like, he's defiant. He's this, he's that, he's anything other than, no, he's here when he's supposed to be here in the uniform he's supposed to be in, trying to do what he's supposed to be doing. I just won't go get the COVID shot. And at the end of it all, here I am thinking I'm going to get kicked out of the Army and my life's going to be forever changed. And I'm going to be stuck working construction or whatever it is, because here I think I'm going to be a felon for just refusing a vaccine. Finally, the February drill rolls around and I get a call to go meet with the state aviation officer, a full bird colonel. And I'm in his office and he's got, for the prior 10 years, all of my officer evaluation reports, my officer record brief. Those are annual reports you get from your chain of command, and all of my OERs were like exceptional. Like I had done very well throughout my military career. The ORB, the officer record brief, shows like your deployments, shows your awards, your recognitions, anything you've done good in the military. He's looking at that and he's like, man, like you're just the exemplary soldier. I can't lose somebody like you. Like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, you tell me.
Why are you guys doing this?
You tell me, sir. Like I'm just here. Like I just want my out brief. I just want to get out of the Army. I don't want to have anything to do with you guys anymore because of what you're trying to force me to do. We talked for an hour, had a good conversation. Ultimately, he ended up just letting me get out of the military because I didn't owe a commitment. And he said that, well, what if in a year the mandate goes away? I don't want you to have to not be able to come back into the military. So what if I put you in the reserves? And I'm, again, just trying to go along with, I don't want to give him too much pushback because I'm anxiously awaiting, like, he has my fate in his hands, right? Like, what kind of discharge is he going to give me? And he says, well, what if I just put you in the reserves for a year because I can't lose a soldier like you. I need you in this formation. I need you around, like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll just go into the reserves for a year. And honestly, I said, after the year is up though, I don't know that I'll come back anyways. Like if the mandate goes away in a year, what if it comes back in 2? Then I'm right back at square one. And I don't ever want to be in this position again where I don't have control over my life. Like you guys own every bit of me, like militarily, and then you're going to affect my entire life, my kids' life, the things that I can provide for them, because you're going to change me to turn me into this criminal that I'm not, just for not taking a vaccine. And that's ridiculous to me. And then his tune changed a little bit and he's like, well, I mean, yeah, you're good. You can get out of the Army. I've got 25 people that want to take your spot tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. There are probably 25 dudes that would love to be a pilot. I remember being one of those people one day. I was like, but what you don't have is the, 12 years of experience, the combat deployments, I was an instructor pilot in a different helicopter, albeit, but I brought a lot to the table when I was in the military. And, he kind of just shuns it, like, yeah, well, I've got 25 people who would love to take your spot. So we're not losing anything with you. I'm like, feelings are mutual, sir. Like I'll take my stripes and go.
Looking back, would you change it?
No, not at all.
It's interesting, all the information that's come out since on what this few of the three-letter acronymed agencies knew about the virus or the vaccine that they didn't share with the public, about viral shedding, how you are contagious to others for 2 weeks afterwards. There is an effect on your DNA long term. There are things in the vaccine that are not necessarily healthy. It's just interesting how those,
and you know what,
all those agencies conspire to push a movement, and it's not necessarily for the greater health.
And this is where I feel like the military got just kind of super politicized, where this vaccine became a political movement. It was, right versus left. If you get the vaccine, then you're obviously you support this. If you don't get the vaccine, then you're labeled as whatever. Labels aside, I didn't get the vaccine because I personally felt like it was not the right thing for me to do.
Gotcha.
And then looking back at the friends who did get it, who were in the military, they all have regrets. So I can ultimately say I don't have regrets on how things went, because as soon as that happened, like the same week that I had my out brief with the colonel, I was offered my dream job to fly privately for a family, fly airplanes and helicopters for them. And it's the most amazing job I could ever imagine. And I get to be home with my kids. I get to help with the homeschooling. And I also get to be an example to them and show them that, it does stand a purpose to stand up for your values and have integrity for what you believe in. If you pick something, right, wrong, or indifferent, stand up for it and defend that. Take that with you as far as you can. And I feel like I definitely showed my kids that, you know what, like sometimes it's not the easy thing to do, but ultimately I think it was the right thing to do.
That's awesome. Well, Sam, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Loved having you here.
It's been
fantastic. I can agree more with you of maintaining your individual integrity and individual honesty, and setting that example for your kids. It's vitally important. So got to wrap this up. We're running low on memory cards. All right. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to clickety-click, like, share, and subscribe. We grow by you guys sharing these awesome experiences with your friends and loved ones. Don't forget to turn in next time for an excellent episode of The Value Script.